Hello, puppies and kittens. I am speaking with the co-founder and spokesman for the Satanic Temple. And before we even get into talking to you, Lucian, I just want to mention I had an argument that I don't think I told you about. I had an argument with my mother from a couple years ago, where she told me, haven't you heard about all the Satanists doing all these terrible things to the children? I'm like, really, Mom? Because you only watch OAN and other like extreme right-wing propaganda channels. Let's just Google it, right? Let's just Google Satanists and see what comes up. And I get the Satanic Temple wins a case for after-school Satan. Satanic Temple wins a case for First Amendment defense. One thing or the other. I go through like 4 or 5 things. Satanic Temple is look at this, Mom. Satanic Temple. The Satanists are doing really good things. You know what I don't see? I don't see this abuse of children. Why can't we find that, Mom? Maybe you should change your sources of information.
Well, in her defense, you'll often see a lot of articles come out where they'll put in the headline something about Satanist commits murder or commits some foul act or whatever. And it often comes down, if you're looking at the stories, reading something like from the Daily Star or something like that, who incidentally were the first ones to pick up this story about our new abortion clinic and wrote about it accurately, which is bizarre because most of the time they're throwing Satanists in headlines, and then it'll come down to something like perpetrator had a copy of the Satanic Bible, or the sheriff's department called the act satanic, regardless of whether it was attached to any religious conception or any if the crime had any ritualized ideological aspect to it. And half the time they don't. But what you don't see is kind of a equal representation when it comes to religious crimes. You see exorcism deaths all the time, and you don't see people saying, well, maybe we should stop this bizarre cult-like behavior and belief system. It's always a random crazy when it's a Christian. My favorite one, I cite it all the time. People might be getting a little sick of it, but in Oklahoma, at the time when we were first fighting to put up our Baphomet monument, there was a small-scale satanic panic meltdown at that time because we were doing this. And in that time, some Christian guy cut off the head of his roommate's friend or something like that while they were playing cards. And according to witnesses at the time, the guy was watching all kinds of Christian videos. He accused the guy he cut the head off of engaging in witchcraft. It was very clear that he was motivated by superstitious religious belief to murder this person on account of him supposedly practicing witchcraft. The sheriff came out and said that because they found no ties to Islam with this beheading, that there were no religious implications. I mean, there's just a complete blindness to crimes committed by crazed Christians. But if you so much as own a satanic Bible, and with that in mind, having as much membership as we've had, having as many people carrying cards for 10 years, the lack of stories popping up is actually kind of astonishing.
Yeah, I hear that. By the way, this is my last good beer in my fridge. I just want to show everybody what I'm drinking. This is
is that King Diamond?
This is called Black Metal Imperial Stout.
Nice.
I don't think it is supposed to be King Diamond. I wanted to ask you, before we jump into the reason that I wanted to talk to you today, there was another project that you guys did, which, by the way, the reason that I joined the Satanic Temple was because I wanted to give more public support for what you guys were doing for the First Amendment. I mean, I'm on the board of directors of American Atheists. We're a 501c3, and in that capacity as a secular organization, there's only so much we can do, even though our primary goal is defense of the First Amendment. But what I was seeing was that the Satanic Temple was making inroads in First Amendment defense you're defending the Constitution in some ways, in some instances, better than the mainstream First Amendment defenders organizations can, which I found impressive. So,
well, one thing, I mean, not to digress too far, but being on the board of American Atheists, I hope you sometimes get the opportunity to advocate for the notion of non-theistic religion, because I think to a certain degree, atheists insisting that all religion is toxic just helps reaffirm that idea that religion can't exist without superstition, that all religion, in order to be credible, must be theistic. And when we find ourselves in a period of time in which religion becomes a super category, and it's very difficult to make claims of conscience removed from the context of religion, you're really handicapping yourself if you hand over the idea that only theistic religion is protected, that items of religious opinion aren't protected, or non-belief is not protected. And for our part, we are, as you say, we defend these constitutional values, but these constitutional values align with our deeply held beliefs. And I think people oftentimes think, or at least they'll ask me, well, what does this have to do with, what do you believe then? We know you do this political stuff, but what do you believe? And it's, well, this stuff is all a reflection of what we believe. We really believe in that kind of open epistemic environment, that pluralism, making space for different belief systems and different practices and different people to peacefully coexist. And we feel that's being very compromised right now. But, as to the question of whether we're political or we're religious, we're both. We are very much a religious group. If we didn't have the fight to fight, I think we would still be identifying and practicing as we do. But we really see a need to push back when our ability to practice as we see fit is challenged. And in that way, we're no different than a lot of other religious groups from extending much further back in time.
well, now you're going to force me to come up with a gripe, because I had. Well, let me get my microphone over in the same room where I am. I had a perfectly working definition of religion, which is a belief system, a faith-based belief system that posits the notion that a supernatural essence of self somehow survives the death of the physical body to continue on in some other form. That definition applied to absolutely every belief system that was commonly recognized as a religion by both its adherents and its critics. And then the Satanic Temple comes along with an atheist religion wherein you literally don't have a belief. When you say that we have these beliefs, we're talking about the First Amendment.
Well,
where you and I
gotta correct you there, because humanists have fought for religious recognition without having an eternal personal deity. Jainism is one of those that's a non-theistic religion. Confucianism has often been considered a religion. There are non-theistic Buddhists. And honestly, I think this is more than just a semantic game, right? And I think we're often accused of finding a loophole. I think this is the way things are supposed to work. And honestly, if you are going to be giving exceptions and preferences to certain claims of conscience, I think it would be unconscionable to narrow it to a definition that's theistic. And I honestly think some of the pushback we get from the atheist crowd that feels like we're misusing religious terminology or something like that just comes from a real reticence to overturn those definitions that have worked well for them throughout time, and certainly work well to describe the what we would hold as our opposition. The theocratic elements that try to impose their beliefs on others, they're often, if not always, motivated by a supernatural belief that that uniformity is necessary to bring moral progress, bring forth some kind of millenarian ending or something of the type.
No, just to be clear, I have no objection to being forced to expand my comprehension on a given topic. I had a definition that worked really well, and the Satanic Temple is the only exception to that, which irritates me.
It's
But
worth the
anyway,
irritation, I think, if we make real headway.
okay. But I had another question. Before we get into the topic that I wanted to talk about today, there's another thing that the Satanic Temple did. Now, of course, famously, when Oklahoma City wanted to put up the Ten Commandments, the Satanists come up with well, let's put up our Baphomet statue. And what's important about that is, and I'm saying this, of course, for all the people who don't know, who haven't followed the story, the Hindus came up with their statue that they wanted to dedicate to Hanuman, the Monkey King, which typical people in Oklahoma, regardless of their religious background, are not going to know who the fuck Hanuman is.
That might as well be Satan too.
Right.
And you often see that. You often see some of the really hardcore, strict, narrow view Christian nationalists define Santeria and other belief systems that have nothing to do with Satanism also as Satanism.
So I remember in Florida there was an atheist group, and I think it was my org, American Atheists, who put up this thing with a quote from Madeleine Murray O'Hair. But the Christians didn't understand that it was an atheist monument. They thought it was a dedication to science, because it also included a quote from Carl Sagan engraved in the marble. So if the Christians don't even understand what the fuck they're talking about, or what we're talking about, what the monument even is, then it doesn't have any impact, right?
Well, it was a bench, if I remember correctly. It was like a stone bench, and I loved the idea behind the bench. The bench also came with some kind of statement about how it served a utilitarian function, right? You could even sit on it, right? It wasn't just a symbol. And we were aware of that when we were fighting to put up the Baphomet in Oklahoma, and we were also looking to have some kind of utilitarian function for our monument, because when we proposed the idea that we would donate a monument as well, because they were accepting this private donation of a Ten Commandments monument, we didn't even have a design yet. So then we wanted something that, maybe kids could play on, and that's an idea that provokes outrage, But we ultimately, made the Baphomet monument, but made it so that the lap could be sat upon and people could take pictures of it, because we knew it would be a destination point. If this monument's actually out in public, people are going to go just to see it. They'll sit, take pictures with it. Now it resides at our headquarters doing just that. And we've been in like 8 years of litigation now to have it put up in Arkansas. Oklahoma, they took down their Ten Commandments monument. So we went immediately over to Arkansas, where they're fighting the same battle, and they have the Ten Commandments monument. It's been up there all this time. We've been in litigation, and we just have not gotten a ruling. It's been a year or two since anything has moved. I don't know. I don't know if the judge is just ignoring it or what, but that's how the legal process is.
The point I was going for was that there were in Oklahoma and in Florida, there were a number of different religious perspectives that were trying to compete for the Ten Commandments, but the common man didn't understand what any of them were. And so it seems like we have all these Christian groups who want to advocate for the Ten Commandments. They want to advocate for faith-based initiatives, including faith-based schools, until a Muslim school wants those funds. And then suddenly the Christians wake up, they suddenly smell the coffee and realize, but we're supposed to be a secular nation. We can't be giving money to Muslim schools. Right. That's the same thing. So it doesn't matter if you have an atheist monument. It doesn't matter if you have a Hindu monument, Native American religions. Nobody cares unless it's the Muslims or the Satanists.
Well, we have novelty on our side too. When there was in Florida also, there was a school district that was allowing for passive distribution of Bibles and religious literature at the school. And by passive distribution, they meant the people running these tables weren't supposed to go up to students and say, here, I think you should have this. But they were sitting at a table and they were able to give these free products to the children if they came up to get it. So we said we wanted to do the same thing. And that's when we created the Satanic Activity book. It was, there's this coloring book, completely benign, impossible to complain about it other than objecting to the fact that it's produced by Satanists and it mentions Satanism and has satanic iconography on it.
It's got this adorable goat-headed baby.
Yeah, but when I was talking to the media at the time, I was saying what you're going to end up with are a bunch of kids who have been inundated with Christian literature material all their lives. Then there's going to be a table of our stuff. What do you think they're going to be more interested in? And at what point do you just allow people to make their own choices, keep these spaces neutral, stop turning them into divisive battle zones, and letting religion be religion and school be school, and trying to keep a line between the two, keeping a line between the church and the state?
Well, let me ask you about a couple of other things that TST has been involved with. One of them is the After School Satan. Yes. Can you quickly let people listening in right now understand what After School Satan is?
In the early 2000s somewhere, there was a Supreme Court case, Good News Clubs versus Milford Middle School, I believe it was. And there was a Christian organization, the Evangelical Childhood something network or whatever, and they were putting together these Good News Clubs. And they're after-school clubs that were proselytizing Christianity in a very specific, really kind of dogmatic, authoritarian.
Let me jump in on that, because I've been following a number of the other people that have been going against the Good News Clubs. There's nothing good news about this. It's
you're going to go to hell if you don't follow the true path kind of thing.
Yeah, extreme fire and brimstone kind of proselytizing to young children, kindergarten and first grade, terrifying them, and programming
their original. Their original curriculum was specifically made to target, I think, between 5 and 12-year-olds.
And so they would end up going back to their parents and disrupting the family, because now the 6 or 7-year-old is part of some evangelical thing that they obviously don't understand, but then nobody does. But now they're opposed to whatever the family's faith is at the same time. So this was a really insidious group.
Yeah, and well, what we also found is that the Good News Clubs unopposed began to get a lot more privileges than they were allotted by the court. The Supreme Court, you can look at their decision to allow these religious after-school clubs and understand it as being a legitimate interpretation of law. The idea that these clubs aren't endorsed by the schools or the school district, they're not a part of the curriculum. And Clarence Thomas was trying to make the case that any reasonable person, even a child, would understand that this wasn't something endorsed by the school, but that it was a separate thing. All of the history preceding that, or all the history thereafter, would bring the lie to that. You see that people really do feel that this is endorsed by the school district, just given their response to us applying to have an after-school club. Then all of a sudden you see that the reasonable person thinks that it's up to the school to decide which after-school clubs can stay, which can go, which are approved, which aren't. And they do take the after-school clubs to be endorsed by the school district. You see that in all the city council meetings that will have anything to do with it, the school board meetings. People really think it's up to the school districts to decide the curriculum of the after-school clubs. So I feel like just for that alone, the rationale should be revisited, because it's obviously proven false. But that is what we did. We asked for our own after school clubs, and we go into the school districts where they already have clubs like the Good News Clubs. There's other ones in the game now, and usually they're trying more and more to bring proselytizing a Christian point of view into the schools. And I feel that if nothing else, it is creating a balancing effect, because once we get there, all of a sudden, some of the privileges that were given to the Good News Clubs that they should have never had to begin with. Like, we were hearing stories of them passing out their permission slips inside the schools, setting up tables during the school day, giving kids treats and candies, as kind of a coercive effort to bring them into school, into the after school club. But some of the school districts we found were actually, they would have like the shorter school day, and then the time after that would usually be filled by the school day was filled by a Good News Club. So you had a lot of parents too who were kind of just putting their kids in this after school club as a method of daycare because there was nothing else. So there's a real need for an alternative. In our club, we're clear, we're not proselytizing a religious viewpoint, we're making it educational. Originally, we made kind of a whole curriculum plan, and then we realized kids don't want to be trying to get a degree when they're in an after-school club. You kind of want to make it fun. So we did a self-directed learning program. We give them a lot of activities, games, things like that. And then there are people there who can guide them, talk to them about the greater critical thinking message behind this. Funny thing about that, though, is that anytime we do anything differently from what the opposition does, they try to narrow in on that to delegitimize us. And we even had the argument at one point that if we're not teaching religion, if we're not pushing our viewpoints and proselytizing to the kids, then we're not legitimate as well. And I think that's a real race to the bottom.
That's one of the problems that I had. I mean, growing up in the 80s, as part of the satanic panic kind of thing, where I'm trying to explain to these people that you are a believer. You are a make believer. You're trying to make me believe. You're trying to make yourself believe. You are a pretender. I am not a pretender. I don't have to believe anything. I'm open to whatever you can show me to be true. Right. And so, but that doesn't have any impact on people. You have to be a believer just like they are. They don't understand non-belief. So they do everything they can to turn atheism into instead of not believing the claims of theism, of the impossible nonsense of theistic claims. They want atheism to be a belief in the opposite. It has to be a belief. It can't be a non-belief because they don't know how to deal with non-belief. So it has to be a belief, or worse, it has to be a declaration that there is no God. That whatever, they have to misrepresent the position entirely. So on the whole satanic thing, in the 80s, I was constantly accused of, if you don't believe in God, that means you believe in Satan. I'm like, how the fuck? If I don't believe in Bugs Bunny, that doesn't mean I believe in Daffy Duck. Where's this coming from? And so one guy, an employer of mine, at one point told me that if you don't believe in God, then you don't believe in the Bible. If you don't believe in the Bible, then you don't believe in God, and if you don't believe in God, then you don't believe in Satan, and you don't believe in the Word of God, and God says that you are with me or against me. So if you're not with me, then you're against me, which means you're in league with the enemy, which means that you worship Satan. So I'm like, okay, so if I don't believe in God, that means I worship Satan. And I said, I don't believe in Daffy Duck. Does that mean I worship him too?
I got tired of engaging in the atheism debates after a while. The concept of God doesn't really do a whole lot for me, and yeah. I feel like you can only argue so much against somebody arguing for something that they have no evidence for, and you start falling into these philosophical spirals that go nowhere. But what I love is when somebody's intimidated that you might have some academic knowledge, so they draw back their claims all the way to, well, then what happened before the Big Bang? And if you don't have an answer for that, then therefore God, some consciousness was the prime mover. But when you've reduced it down to just claiming that some consciousness must have been behind it all, which is just declared by fiat, how do you get from that to God is offended by homosexuality, or you must have these marriage protocols, or whatever else, or the Bible has the sole legitimacy as being the voice of that divine consciousness. It's
So,
silliness.
and somehow homosexuality is a sin of abomination, but tattoos and eating shellfish are not, even though they're all spelled out as sinful in the same book, in the same, in Leviticus specifically, like one page apart from each other in some cases.
Just before the Big Bang, there was God, and he was thinking, damn it, now it's only a matter of time before butt stuff starts.
So again, with another employer I once upon a time had, I got into it with my boss's boss, who was an evangelical Christian, and he starts asking me all these questions, and he thinks that if I don't have the answer, that means he's right. Right. So he starts asking me, how did this happen? So I start to explain it. So he interrupts the answer because he doesn't want the answer. He asks another question. All right, so I'm going to stop explaining the thing I was trying to explain to him, which I can prove to be true. And now I had to answer this question. And when he realizes I've had the answer to that one also, then he interrupts that answer to ask another question and keeps asking all these questions until, as you said, he goes, what happened before the Big Bang? I'm like, well, that question doesn't even make any sense. And he says, so see, you come to a point where you have no answer. And I said, see, you never had an answer to begin with. Ever. Science answered all of these things. You answered fuck all.
I do debates, and I go on Fox News and things like that. And the best advice I can give to anybody going into those kinds of debates is always have your message, always have the things you want to convey, and don't get thrown off course by somebody saying something so stupid that you have no idea how to confront it. There comes a certain point if somebody's just babbling nonsense, you just have to double down on whatever you were talking about and present some point of reason, because sometimes the worst thing they can do is just throw a barrage of nonsense at you and just leave you dumbfounded in silence, because sometimes the common idiot will look at that and say, well, see, he doesn't know what to say. Sometimes somebody can say something so dumb in the course of a few sentences that it would take you a book to dismantle it entirely.
Yeah.
And you can't get caught up in that.
That's a valid point, because when you're correcting somebody, you first have to show how everything they said was wrong.
Right.
I have seen people have as many as 19 errors in one sentence.
Yeah,
more errors.
It can really be an art.
More errors in one sentence than there are words in that sentence. So you have to show what all the mistakes are, and then show the correction of it. So it gets to be impossible, especially when you're talking about people who have no accountability, which religion is by design unaccountable. They can say anything the fuck they want to because they just get to believe it regardless. But before we talk about any more about that, I've been trying for a while now. I'm surprised we've been talking for like 30 minutes, and I'm still trying to get to this one thing I wanted to start with. That one of the programs that TST did that I am not intimately familiar with is something called the Protect the Children program.
Yeah, we started that in recognition of the fact that there's still an unholy number of school districts that still allow corporal punishment and solitary confinement even for students. Protocols that are viewed as inhumane to practice even in prisons. It's funny how much pushback we get from people about the idea of making sure there's a complete and total ban of corporal punishment in schools. People talking about, well, how are we supposed to discipline the children and things like that. We're not talking about outbreaks in which restraint or things like that are necessary. Those are held separate. We're talking corporal punishment as a formal standard procedure, disciplinary action, and all the empirical evidence weighs against it as being a proper, productive corrective. Children's outcomes are universally worse when you introduce beatings into the whole equation. And
As I have a few years on you, let me just jump in support of what you're saying, because I was always taught my whole life, even as a small child, you spare the rod, spoil the child. You were supposed to physically abuse your children.
Right.
So I was commanded many times as a little bitty boy. I was commanded that I had to go out and fetch, because that's a word we don't use anymore. Fetch a switch, which means that I had to go break off not a dead limb. I had to break off a green limb, and I had to strip all of the extra branches or leaves off of it, and then I had to test it so that it would make that whoop noise when it went through the air, so that I could then give that to my grandmother, who would then pull my pants down and completely miss my ass, always hitting me in the back of my thighs, because I asked her a question she can't answer.
Yeah. And there's still no small number of people who think that is the correct and moral thing to do. And it would be comical if it weren't so grim, if there weren't actually that cost of children are actually being beaten. But the irony of seeing people complain in regions where we put up billboards in support of our Protect Children project. Billboards will show our iconography. And, we had a billboard that said in Texas, our religion doesn't believe in beating children. And it had a link to our Protect Children project page. And to see local outrage from people claiming that this is deplorable, this is horrific, and oftentimes they will say it goes against the guiding principle that they hold religiously, that to spare the rod is to spoil the child. And you do see, when we do this, how much of a religious war that really is, the war to be allowed to beat your children, and to allow the schools to, it's a whole different topic, even what parents choose to do, but to give public schools, the option of beating children as a corrective disciplinary measure seems so barbaric and backward. And it is. And I think when you have something that barbaric and backward, people only manage to hang on to it through some dogmatic theistic religion.
I remember when I was in second grade, and Principal Osborne had a badminton wooden bat that had holes drilled through it to reduce the wind resistance. That always sounds like a bullshit story, but this principal had that. He used it on me.
Oh, it's believable, because they still do it. They still do it today. It's not. I don't know what the number is now of how many school districts still do it, but last I was looking into it, and we still have this campaign active. So I'm sure there's people in our Protect Children project who have a better grasp of the current stats. But if my understanding is correct, the number has actually gone up in time. In more recent times, I think more school districts have passed statutes, or whatever they call them in the school board, that allow for corporal punishment.
The thing that alarms me about that is I was so conditioned by constantly hearing the same message over and over again that I thought, when I was a child, that this is how I would raise my children. This is how you're supposed to raise your children. But not just your children, also your pets. And what I learned from my pets, fortunately, my pets taught me this before my children did, that if you punish a dog, if you bring up violence as a solution to your dog, then your dog learns that violence is a solution, that violence is a valid response. And so as an adult, I watched a man trying to punish a pit bull And I knew that the man had small children. Like, no. You never, ever visit violence against a dog. The most important thing that your dog knows is that he doesn't want to disappoint you. If you change it from disappointment to you're going to physically abuse that dog, the dog is going to physically abuse you at some point.
I have a Dutch Shepherd Malinois mix now, and she's a protection dog, and I don't think I could take her.
My wife and I foster rescue dogs. We have a husky, we have a boxer, we have an Akita, we have a Great Pyrenees, we've had pit bulls, Rottweilers, and if we ever had the kind of conditioning that I was trained to use on these dogs, I wouldn't have all fingers on both hands.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. Right, exactly. I mean, I play hard with her. She's got the pull toy and everything, and it's amazing. I haven't lost a finger, but as soon as she accidentally makes contact, she goes slack.
I get that, and animals are surprisingly understanding in that way, and so are children. And I'm glad that my dogs taught me this before my children had to. So I was completely misled, according to religious standards on how you're supposed to abuse your children growing up. Now, to get to the topic I wanted that I invited you to talk about. What is happening this weekend, sir?
We are opening our third abortion clinic. It's a telehealth clinic. It's in Maine. We're calling it the President's Huge, Most Beautiful, Tremendous Satanic Abortion Clinic. And it's opening on the 14th, which happens to be the president's birthday.
Which president?
And, let's see. Oh, his name is Donald J. Trump. I do my best not to mention the guy, but
on Donald Trump's birthday, you're opening what is effectively Donald Trump's Satanic Abortion Clinic.
Satanic Abortion Clinic. And we're letting them know as part of our fundraising efforts for opening the clinic and keeping our clinics operating, because we do everything we can to charge nothing to the patients who come through. We're the lowest cost option. We charge for the medicine. That's it. People call, get their consultation, and that's how it runs with the 3 clinics. And you can purchase a birthday card celebrating the opening of the Satanic Abortion Clinic, and we will send it to the president for his birthday on the 14th. So check out our website, send the president a card. I drew a picture for the clinic. It's a little diapered baby Trump flanked by little cherub baby Trumps and the name of the abortion clinic. And that's being printed on shirts and things like that. Get one of those if you want also to support the effort. But I'm happy we're doing this. Third state, we're establishing ourselves more and more, and we'll do our best to continue providing services as we can nationwide. We've been putting forward lawsuits in defense of our religiously protected right to provide abortions, and it still remains fairly untested. We've had some of the cases thrown out on technical grounds. Judges have refused to really confront the core legal question, because I think it's really difficult to do that. And I think it's really difficult to say that we don't have the religious liberty to do this, especially with the expanse of religious liberties being offered now to other religious liberty groups. And we have an abortion ritual. And I bring this up for a reason. The ritual is there for people who are getting an abortion, who would like to kind of reaffirm the affirmative values that lead them to make this decision and reaffirm for them that it's okay in an environment where there's forces trying to bring a lot of pain, shame, humiliation, and inconvenience to anybody who's going to try to terminate a pregnancy. And in that way, this abortion ritual just helps kind of reaffirm the decision made and contextualize it within our tenets in the deeply held beliefs of those actually getting the abortion procedure. But because this is attached to a ritual, it's sort of really difficult to disentangle from the types of protections offered, especially under RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And so far, we've opened our abortion clinics in states that have RFRA laws on file, state RFRA laws. And I think at some point, we'll be able to make the argument that we should be able to distribute to our membership anywhere within the United States. And our religious liberties should be protected federally, allowing us to do so. We haven't reached that point yet, but having had a clinic open in 23 and now having one open after that, and then another one now in 25, we really have, at least in the interim, kind of beaten down the ability of our opposition to claim that this is a one-off, or this is some kind of prank. They always love to say is what we're doing, or that we're otherwise not invested in this issue and doing it simply for the attention, the publicity, or the ability to bring the lawsuit. None of that stands to reason after a certain point, and we passed that point long ago.
I understand something about your background and what you have to endure. I mean, I know that publicity, certainly personal publicity, is not at all what you're after. You and I have more in common in the primary drive is defense of the First Amendment. Am I correct?
Yeah, and to that end, that idea that we're looking for attention, we're terrible at. We're good at people, responding to the things we do when it comes to our press releases and things like that. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people probably didn't hear of our first two clinics. And on the opening of this third one, we realized we really have to do better to do a sustained pitch to get people to recognize this, to get the word out, get some media attention, because I mean, honestly, we do need it to keep operations going. We do operate these things based upon the donations given to us, but we've been honestly terrible at kind of keeping up on the propaganda and getting out there and doing the interviews and things like that. Because I think a lot of us doing this, people a lot of times will see us when people are laughing, saying, wow, you're really opening an abortion clinic in the president's name. That's hilarious, and feel like we're just doing victory laps all the time. But you might be surprised to hear we're actually really controversial. We get a lot of hate mail. We get a lot of people.
You get hate mail?
Yeah, we get a lot of people yelling rude shit, and yeah, so it can kind of make you feel more relaxed when you're not in the spotlight, and when people aren't concentrating on what you're doing. You can really get used to the lulls in the action, but we do need to get the word out. So that's another way people can help. Just share it on the social media or whatever else, and let people know that this is a thing.
I got to tell you that I gave a speech recently. I was in Colorado, and there seemed to be some conflict between you have your typical atheist group, your humanist group, the people who are strictly against religion, but then you also had a number of Satanists who were, because I'm speaking, they're going to be there, and so there was this mix of rejection of religion entirely, by the way that I defined it earlier today, and these other people that hold to a secular religion. and all the and all the conflict and confusion that can raise. So I had to write into my speech my explanation for, you're going to accuse me, if I don't believe in your God, you're going to accuse me of worshiping your devil. Oh, okay, then fine, right? I don't worship your devil, but if you want to call me a Satanist, fine, I'm a Satanist. And now let's talk about equal representation under the law, under the First Amendment, in prohibition. You know, you're gonna prohibit the free exercise of my religion now. So that had to come out in the speech. And it is confusing for a lot of atheists to understand the concept of a secular religion. I tell you honestly, I'm having trouble with it, but I don't. And a lot of people complained when I joined the Satanic Temple, because they said you're going to catch so much hell for it, and I did. You know, both from atheists and certainly, of course, from Christian. You know, well, you're a Satanist. Well, and what do you think that means? Stupid. Come on.
Well, I love the ones who will insist that the mythic Satanists of the Satanic Panic, who never existed, are real, while we who actually self-identify as Satanists and are doing things in the real world are fake somehow.
Yeah,
but I remember one of
you.
the first lectures I was doing at a university. We were watching people come in, and it was similar to your experience about seeing there's a division in the crowd. And I think my demographics have shifted to a more neutral looking audience, and you can't tell anymore. But at the time, people were coming in. You had, and it was a high level law school. And you had people coming in their khakis and polo shirts and shit. And the organizer was looking out the window, and he started saying, "Ah, damn it! I should not have posted about this on social media." I was like, "What is this?" And I looked out, and it was a crowd, like leather and spikes and everything. And I was telling him, "This is not the crowd to worry about in my case." These aren't the ones who are going to take a shot at me.
Yeah, I get that. So the next thing I want to ask you, remind us again about the name of the telehealth, and help me understand what telehealth means. Let's start with that. What is the telehealth abortion clinic?
You call on the phone. You consult with the acting physician or registered nurse. I don't remember what the qualifications are, but we've got them. And you discuss your needs. They go over the qualifications with you, and you can get your pharmaceutical abortion. You can get your legal abortifacients, and it's as easy as that. And I don't know how many we have served. Some hundreds, I guess, at this point. First one was in New Mexico. It was the Sam Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic.
Spoiler alert. That was that was the next thing I was going to ask you. Tell the people again, what was the name of the first abortion clinic that the Satanic Temple ever endorsed or opened?
Yeah. Sam Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic. And if anybody doesn't know, Samuel Alito was the Chief Justice who wrote the majority opinion in the overturn of Roe versus Wade.
But it's beautiful that it's not Samuel Alito's abortion clinic. It's Samuel Alito's mom's abortion.
Well, I was giving a lecture in Georgetown like a year or two ago. Actually, a year and a half ago in October. And, I didn't know Georgetown was Catholic. So, but it was a great audience. It was a great crowd. And they asked earnest questions, even when they're asking hard questions. But I remembered somebody there saying, "Now, I get going after Samuel Alito, but his mom?" And I said, in the context of an abortion clinic, Samuel Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic is still about Sam Alito, if you dig my meaning. Anyways.
Which, of course, they didn't.
Yeah. It's still not really about his mom.
So I was going to ask you about the one just preceding this and then get to the original one, because the original one is the funniest of all names. But what is the one now that comes between those two?
Well, that one, we crowdsourced the name. Donors were able to vote on the name of the second abortion clinic in Virginia. and that one ended up being the Right to Your Life abortion clinic. That's what the crowd wanted. A bit less funny, but hey, that's the message.
Well, you can't crowdsource for that thing because that's how you end up with a yacht named Bodie McBoatface.
Yeah. I think for the second one, I suggested something like Jerry Falwell Jr.'s Pool Boys abortion clinic or something like that. That might be a little obscure for some people, but apparently Jerry Falwell Jr. Watch his wife pork the pool boy.
Yeah, I remember that story. Pardon me, I am being physically mauled by a super predator. I'm gonna have to. Ow!
Oh no!
Ow! All right.
Random cat violence.
Yeah, Lucian, thank you so much for this. I knew that this was going to be an amusing discussion, and it was, I think, a little bit better than I expected.
Well, so, I'm happy to provide. I'll tell people what the link is if they want to see the T-shirt. I'm proud of the design. If you just look at the design, I'll be happy enough. But if you want to buy one, that's great.
I should have probably asked you this in advance. If there are any links you want me to include, please send those to me as quickly as you can, and I'll put those in the description.
Okay, yeah, great. I'll do that.
All right. Thank you so much, Lucean Greaves, the Satanic Temple, doing good work, sir.
Great, thank you.